aware, this is the first meeting of the new cycle, and accordingly I'll pass over to Rebecca Brookes as our monitoring officer to manage the appointment of the chair and vice chair for the committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can we confirm any apologies, please, Marcus?
Yeah, we've had apologies from Councillor Jason Charity.
Thank you. So as it's the first meeting of the municipal year, the first order of business for the committee is to appoint its chair and vice chair. In accordance with the terms of reference, we've had expressions of interest for the position of the chair in advance of the meeting from Councillor Philip Lofts and Councillor Jason Charity. Can I just confirm whether there are any further nominations at this point? Okay. So the elected members have voting rights on the committee, the 3 members in attendance today. So to start with, can I please take votes in favour of Councillor Philip Lofts? Okay, thank you. And votes in favour of Councillor Jason Charity? Okay, thank you. So that's 3 votes in favour of Councillor Philip Lofts, and therefore he's appointed as the chair for 25-26. The committee vice chair must be an independent member. Dave Phillips has put himself forward for the position. Please can I confirm whether there are any further nominations at this point? And is the committee happy to approve that vice chair appointment? Thank you. Then Dave Phillips is therefore appointed as the vice chair for the committee. So we'll now briefly pause the webcast while we readjust so that the chair can take up a seat. Thank you.
Good morning, all. I hope it is. Right, I think the first item of business is to appoint the chair of the Transport Risk Working Party. I guess there's only one candidate.
Yes, I'd like to put myself.
Yeah, thank you. So
I'd like to put myself forward for it.
thank you. So all in favour of Paul chairing the Transport Risk? Thank you very much. Moving on. We need to have some members of that group as well, of course. So can we have expressions of interest for membership of the Transport Risk Working Group? 1? Yeah. Okay. 2 is not too many, is it? Thank you. So we'll accept those. Thank you very much. I think next, welcome from the Chief Exec.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I just wanted to come today and introduce myself. So my name's Catherine Hammond. I am the relatively new in post Chief Executive here at CIMCA. I've just come to the end of my 2nd month, so this is the first time I've had the opportunity to come and see you as an audit committee in my tenure. I'm new to CIMCA, but I'm not new to the public sector, neither am I new to the world of audit and its importance. So I've partly come to show my support and recognition of the importance of what you do around this table. I'll join you for just a few minutes this morning, but I'm sure that will be the start of a long and lasting relationship. So thank you for having me here today.
Thank you very much, and our welcome to the Chief Executive. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you. So urgent items. There's been an agenda change in that the Mayor, Oliver Coppard, will not be able to join us until I think 2 o'clock. So Oliver will be here this afternoon. Are there any items to be considered in the absence of public and press? Yes, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I've got one item under AOB which affects the business interests of the authority, which I'd like to take in private, please.
Okay, we'll do that. When the feed's off, we'll do that at the end of the agenda. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair, just to note as well, Appendix D for item 16 is also restricted as well.
Okay, so So that's at the end of the first session.
That's correct, just before the lunch break.
Okay. Can I, in that case, put item 20 to item 16 and change 16 to 17? Yeah, I can because I'm chair. Yeah. Just notifying the officers, really. Okay. Confused myself. Are there any declarations of interest from any members, pecuniary or otherwise? No. Thank you very much. Reports from or questions by members? Nope. Questions from members of the public? None. Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Are they accepted as a true record? And are there any items arising? Do we do items arising? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to draw members' attention to the completed action, which is on page, bear with me, page 27 of the pack. It was from minute 378 and it was under the Treasury Management Strategy 25-26. So to confirm, the narrative is correct that the limit on the intergroup loan facility between the MCA and SIFTL, that action has been completed. The loan facility has been signed off by the monitoring officer and with the representative of SIFTL and set at £10 million. I've had some very helpful and constructive feedback from Dave Phillips and Paul Schofield on this matter, and there's a couple of minor follow-up points that I'm going to be taking forward, such as adjusting the financial regulations. But so just to keep members up to speed that yes, it is complete, but a couple of minor adjustments to be made, and I'll obviously draw that to members' attention when we bring the fin regs back later on this year. Thank you, Chair.
Right. So moving on to item 11, terms of reference review. Been a review of the terms of reference and updates. So the recommendation that members review the terms of reference, noting that the Audit Standards and Risk Committee, and any suggestions will need to be approved by MCA Board. Are there any? No? Okay, thank you. Health and safety update. We're getting on to the real agenda now. Health and safety update. Thank you. Item 12.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's fine. I'm Michelle Stansfield. I'm the Head of Facilities and Asset Management for Simca, and I also lead on health and safety currently.
I'm Jerry Masterson. Good morning. I am the SHEC officer on the light rail team. My role is governance oversight for Simca's operations.
Just to let you know, Sean's on holiday this week, so that's why he's not in attendance, who is the officer for Simca. I will take it as read, hopefully, that everybody has read the report, and I'm happy to discuss any of the items on there, but if anybody does have any questions, fire away.
Thank you very much for your report. I've got just a couple on it. On page 41, there's a comment on a vehicle returning and mounting the curb directly outside the interchange and driving through a group, reportedly striking multiple individuals. I haven't picked this up from the news, and I thought it might have been on the at least the local news. So I'd welcome a bit of an update on what that is. And just on the following page, there's another subject, vehicle impact, to a barrier this time, so not as bad as to people. But no information or incident details have been provided by the bus operator at this time. I was going to ask why and when we got those. And I suppose it all links to the action log fairly earlier, which has a closed action on vehicle mitigations. in it, but these vehicle mitigations are really important. I mean, the logic for that being closed is it's not us, it's the local authorities who provide the mitigations, and I understand that, but it left me somewhat worried because it's, well, I don't know, it's increasingly common, it's maybe not, but it catches the news, and I'd hate us to have a major incident of somebody driving through and then we're saying, well, it was nothing to do with us, it was all the local authorities, and you get in a, it's them, it's you, it's them, it's you. The answer is to get the mitigations in place. So a bit on all of those, please.
No problem. So in relation to Barnsley and the incident that happened at Barnsley, we are speaking with Barnsley regarding bollards being placed outside of the interchange, especially in relation to the main entrances to stop any vehicles from actually being able to hit or actually enter the interchanges. So they are ongoing currently. We are hoping to resolve that, obviously. We did create a report, write a report regarding security at the interchanges. Sheffield interchange, we have already installed gates which are now utilised when the interchange is closed. So they are already in for every access route, vehicular access route into the interchange. Rotherham we are now looking at, and obviously we will also look at Doncaster, so we are working our way through those. So we will keep you updated as to progress, and hopefully Barnsley will be able to give you more information at the next meeting. With regards to the impact at Hillsborough, where the vehicle hit the bus, we are still waiting for a report. We are chasing it, and again we will give you more information as soon as that's provided to us. We have been quite firm in our latest request for information. And apologies, what was the last one?
No, I think that's covered all of them. It was all about vehicle mitigations. And
Yes.
I mean, there was one comment back. So I assume you're chasing the bus operator quite hard because that says it was the 1st of May, so it's a 2 months now. You'd think they'd bother to get back to you on what had happened there. Disappointing that they haven't, I suppose.
Yeah, if I can just say, as a Barnsley member, rather than as chair, that I checked on this item yesterday and I was informed that, fingers crossed, by the start of this meeting the bollards would be in place in Barnsley. So I welcome you being able to check up on that, but it has been treated seriously. I think one of the issues seems to be that the policing inside the interchange and the policing outside the interchange are down to two different bodies. Shouldn't complicate it, but it seems to. There you go. That's me casting blame. No, I'm not. I don't think it makes it easier, but anyway, there you go.
No, I'd agree, but obviously we've still reported this incident even though it happened outside of the interchange, but it's still serious enough that we believe that we should report it.
Sure. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the question of the security bollards, I think I'm right in saying that something like maybe 5-6 years ago, all local authorities reviewed anti-terrorism measures. And I know certainly in Sheffield they installed bollards in public places. Has that same exercise been done for the Simca estate, if we haven't got bollards at Barnsley?
So we did write a security report which covered vehicular access and security of all the interchanges and other areas within Simca. That was done in November of last year, and we are working through actions. And obviously, as I say, one of the actions was Sheffield interchange, which has now been completed. But I was the author of the report. And so I can tell you that all the interchanges were included.
So we're now getting a programme together to take the actions, right? Would it be possible for us to have an update on that in the next report, please, Chair, so we can see what's happened? And just one final point on the bus. In terms of encouraging engagement, do we, if there is fault on the part of the bus company, will we recover the cost of the damage?
We go through the insurance.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to ask just around the antisocial behaviour, if I can, on there. So for Q1, obviously Rotherham saw quite a dramatic reduction in there, which is positive. I just wanted to understand actually what sort of been learnt from that. Is it, you know, for me, looking at that figure, it looks quite a distinctive reduction, and I guess the question is that figure right to start with, which I'm hoping it is, and then is there any learnings from that we can take from that?
I would say that the learning that is we need presence and visual presence, not just us saying that there is somebody, you know, out and about, but actually somebody walking the floors of the interchanges. And whilst we do have people, it may be, well, how do I put this? I would say we need better working relationships with all parties, and that's between all of us. So it is getting very much better with South Yorkshire Police, etc. But I think we need to strengthen our relationships in terms of the interchanges and the behaviours that happen with all of the local authorities as well, so that we get better working relationships with the wardens and the city centre ambassadors. That's my personal view, though.
I think you're right on that. As I mentioned earlier, I think the two sides, I shouldn't describe it as that really, you know, the two agencies responsible for security inside and outside should have a much better working relationship. Yeah. Okay.
A question on the trams on Siftel. We've got 2 signals passed at stop. One of the explanations is that the driver exceeded the time required to pass the signal. How does that work? Are we saying they're on a time delay and automatically set to stop?
So where the tram has priority at some of the signals, the driver will request change of the signal. Traffic lights will then go through a sequence, and that sequence will time out.
Yeah.
So you've then got detection of the tram crossing that point. So this specific incident, the driver was concerned of the behaviour of another road user, so passed the junction rather slowly because he was anticipating poor driving decisions from another road user, at which point the signal timed out, went to a cluster, and then came to a bar while he was partially across the junction, so it was technically a signal past the stop.
Right, thank you for that, that's very helpful. And then just a general question on signals passed at stop. Do we drug and alcohol screen drivers after they've had that?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I suppose a follow-up to that, do we drug and alcohol test drivers as they go on shift?
As they go on shift, you have what's called a for cause. So a duty manager would test anybody that they had reasonable suspicion that may be under the influence of drugs and alcohol. You also have self-reporting of any over-the-counter or prescribed medications that drivers are required to make their duty manager aware of. And then you've also got random testing through the driver medical system. So there's a 10% of drivers that are tested at random on a monthly basis. And then of course you've got the for cause thing, which is not just anybody on the depot who has reasonable suspicion to suspect somebody's under the influence of drugs or alcohol can have that person forecast.
And just as a follow-up to that, have we ever had a case where a signal's been passed at stop because of drugs and alcohol, or where the driver's tested positive for drugs and alcohol?
No.
Anything further? No. Thank you very much for your report.
It's just one more thing, just to let you know. For the September meeting, due to the timings, we won't have a full quarter data of health and safety, because normally it would come out in October. So what we will do, if it's okay with everybody, is we will provide that data for the meeting afterwards, but we will provide an update on all the items that we've discussed today.
Thank you very much. Is that acceptable? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So item 13, MCA Statement of Accounts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So this is presenting the Combined Authorities Unaudited Accounts 24-25, and this is the first set of accounts since the functions of the Police and Crime Commissioner were taken over on the 7th of May. So as part of these accounts, there's been a business combination with the Police and Crime Commissioner, and so all assets and liabilities and reserves of the former PCC were transferred to the MCA on the 7th of May, and no one in the accounts identifies those transfers. All police activity from the 7th of May to the 31st of March is included in the single entity accounts. So what this means is that the figures for 24-25 aren't directly comparable with the 23-24 figures, because the 24-25 figures also include the Police and Crime Commissioner figures. The only figures that we still have on the Chief Constable balance sheet are the pensions liability and holiday pay accrual. So as well as the single entity accounts, which is the former PCC and the MCA, there's also group accounts, which include from 7th of May the Chief Constable, and also South Yorkshire Future Trams Limited, and that's from their commencement of trading on the 22nd of March 2024. And the major impact on the group accounts is that we brought on the police pension scheme liability of £2.3 billion. So the accounts were published on the 30th of June, which complied with the statutory deadline, and they're currently open to public inspection for 30 working days, and they're currently undergoing audit by KPMG. So any questions?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just one question on them. It's probably just terminology more than anything. So on your financial performance, the outturn positions and variances are done against Rev 3, I believe. Could you just explain what Rev 3 is on that basis?
Rev 3 would be the quarter 3 budget position. So there's a review every quarter. There's a budget revision. So Rev 3 would be the budget revision as at the end of December.
But also, so the variance is then done on your revised forecasting rather than the original budget, is that correct?
Sorry, the Rev 3 is the final approved budget of the MCA for 24-5, rather than forecast.
Just for the committee's information, I sent a series of queries, mainly minor, on the accounts through prior to the meeting directly to the officers, so we weren't spending 20 minutes dredging through minor bits and bobs in the middle of a meeting and expecting officers to, off the top of the head, answer queries on 150 pages of accounts. There weren't any major worries in that, and I've had answers back from most of those, so beautiful information.
Just a couple of points on the accounts as well. So within the accounts, you may note that we took a decision to close 24-25 on the assumption there would be a capitalisation direction of some of the costs associated with what we refer to as the legacy compensation schemes associated with Hillsborough and the child sexual exploitation issues that have happened in South Yorkshire That's part of the mitigation strategy for some of the budget issues that we've encountered and uncovered within the former PCC's accounts that are now consolidated into ours. Just to put the committee's mind at ease, yesterday we received the draft capitalisation direction from the Secretary of State for Homes, Local Government and Communities, so that's positive and hopefully gives our audit colleagues the assurance that how we've managed that issue is appropriate for the year. I'd just like to place on the record as well, Chair, my thanks to Owen Ian, Sam Tompkins, Saeed Ahmed and the wider team for all their efforts in preparing the accounts in time for their publication at the end of June. It's clearly a very complicated, complex set of arrangements this year with the business combination that Ian referred to. I've taken quite a lot of time working with colleagues in quite some detail just to test this, given the scale of the challenge this year, and I think they've prepared a really good product, so I'm happy to endorse it to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of general questions. On page 79, I think it is on our pack, there's a breakdown of the costs of the police, and there's a line in there that says agency. Does that refer to the collaborative agreement we've got with the other forces? It's not agency staff that we're hiring?
That is my understanding. I think this was one of the questions that we picked up on as part of our review. This isn't simply temporary staff. Of course, you can't put an agency worker into a warranted officer role, so those costs aren't that significant.
No,
it's I think refers to partnership work with other force areas. So there are lots of issues such as collaboration on crime scene investigation.
And there's a breakdown of what we've contributed to West Yorkshire and Humberside for underwater services as well further through. So that's fine, as long as that's the agency cost. That's good. And I just have to ask this question about page 81 because I think it's the biggest number in the account. There's a remeasurement of net defined benefit liability rate pensions, 179 million, 179.7 million. Could we have a quick explanation of what that one is, please?
Every year the pensions liability is remeasured based on sort of life expectancy, sort of what the markets are doing. I can get back to you with the detail of exactly what that's made up of, but yeah, I can look at what exactly that is made up of, but basically it's a combination of factors that will result in that remeasurement.
And then the final question I had was on inventory, which I'm trying to remember which section that was in other than the balance sheet. And the question was really about the values that we've got in there. I think the headings are uniform, transport equipment and general stocks, if I remember correctly. And under the vehicles, there seemed to be a very small number, like only 28,000 quid's worth of material issued and 23,000 bought, if I remember correctly. And I just wondered what specific items of spares does that relate to? And again, if we want to go away and do that outside, I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah, so we'll need to go and ask the Chief Constable about the breakdown of inventories as well.
Yeah, because I assumed the uniform amount of 2 million quid, if I remember right, is all police kit.
Yeah, so it's a combination of all of the assets that you'd assume would sit with the Chief Constable because they reside with the MCA formally. So it includes everything that we as an MCA would own, but also the Chief Constable. It's primarily Chief Constable inventory.
Right.
I think my understanding, Paul, from the review work is simply things like tyres, kit and equipment that will go on a police vehicle, including the onboard computer equipment, the sirens and the like, is rather than the vehicle itself. So force vehicles are maintained by force.
Are they?
Yeah.
Right.
So there is an in-house team who clearly carry the necessary spares to maintain the vehicles on an ongoing basis.
And where does the SIFTL stock sit then? Do they show up in inventory when they're
That's in our balance.
consolidated?
Yeah, so the SIFTL stocks will be in the part of the group accounts.
On page 226 of the pack, Paul, under note 51 group inventories, the balance at year end was just over £2.5 million for SIFTL inventories. So that will cover, items like tram tyres, all the odds and sods that would undergo wear and tear throughout the course of the year.
Right, that's helpful. Thank you. Fine, that explains it. Cheers.
You mentioned, Paul, that it was a relatively small amount. Of course, if it's for spares, it's not necessarily that small an amount.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see that.
Thank you.
So you'll give Paul a more complete answer on that.
On the inventories, yes, we can get a more detailed breakdown of what's behind the numbers. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So if there's nothing further on that, moving on to item 14, draft external audit plan. You're on.
Thanks, Chair. So this is our draft indicative external audit plan and strategy for the year ending 31st of March 2025, and it's presented to you in draft as we have yet to finalise our planning and risk assessment activities over the group's police and crime related activities. The reason for this is that we agreed a separate timetable with management to complete this work as a result of the later sign-off of the 23-24 police accounts. This work is currently underway and is due to complete over the remainder of July and into early August, after which our intention is to circulate a final group audit plan and strategy to the committee. However, it is worth noting that we have commenced our final audit work over the non-police related balances at the MCA, and this work is progressing well. So in terms of the detail of the report, I'll take it as read but draw out some of the more salient points. So on page 253 of the pack, you will see detail around the impact of the audit backstop on our audit. In order to progress our work to build back assurance, we first had to await the finalisation of the National Sandbox and NAO FRC consultation exercise processes we at KPMG were heavily involved in to help shape the outcome. And as these have now completed, Cllr 6 has been issued. So having been through the detail internally, we're pleased that this aligns with our proposed methodology, which is currently receiving final sign-off as part of our internal approval processes. And we actually hope to be able to finalise the work around this and therefore remove the disclaimer within our opinion as part of this audit cycle. However, as we progress our work, we'll continue to keep the committee updated as to the likely timescale and outcome of this work. Moving on to page 254 of the pack, this highlights our materiality figures we'll apply to the overall group and the newly integrated MCA, both of which are in line with the audit and standards. And for the purposes of testing MCA balances, excluding police and crime activities, we will use a materiality of 8.5 million. Pages 256 to 261 highlight our assessment of significant risk in all our areas of audit risks. In line with the prior year, we have identified one significant risk, which is to do with the non-rebuttable assumption that there is a significant risk associated with the management override of controls, and this is required to be considered on all external audits. However, it's important to note that at this stage we haven't identified an increased risk in this area, but obviously we will keep members updated if this does increase in risk throughout the period of the audit. We have identified 3 other audit risks, the first being the risk of error associated with the valuation of pension liabilities due to the estimation uncertainty associated with this area, specifically in relation to the key assumptions used in the valuation that really drive the big swings that you'll see year on year within that pension liability. We've identified one other audit risk associated with the integration following the transfer of the PCC players in year, which is something that Ian's already touched on in terms of the added complexity that brings to the statement of accounts. And we've identified a further audit risk around the implementation of IFRS 16 due to the fact that it's the first year of its implementation. However, from our point of view, given the materiality and volume of transactions, this is likely to reduce in risk actually once we start doing the work. Pages 261 and 262 of the pack detail our rebuttal of the presumed risks of fraud associated with expenditure and revenue recognition, which is consistent with our assessment in the prior year. And page 263 lays out our high-level considerations associated with the audit of SIFTL, which is an audit which is also currently underway and progressing. And the remaining pages of the document include additional appendices for information as well as mandatory communications that we're required to make to the committee as part of our report pertaining to such areas as our team, our fees and independence. So happy to stop at this point and take any questions on the report.
So we're asked to consider the indicative external audit plan. Are there any comments or questions? Yes, Steph.
Thanks very much for that, James. So apologies, I forgot to turn my phone to silent at the when the meeting started. Somebody I've been trying to get hold of for about 2 years finally rang me back this morning.
Always at the most awkward
Always
time.
at the most awkward time. Anyway, page 273 shows the fees. Yeah, I know audit fees have gone up quite a lot over the last few years. My view was, gosh, they do look quite a lot. I assume A, they're fees suggested by PSAA, so we don't have a lot of choice in them. B, officers are relatively happy with them. And C, would it be reasonable to assume that the agreed fee variations, which are almost half the total fees, will tend to go down over time once you've done all the merger work and you've done quite a lot of backstop work, and we can see these move down to what feels like a lower level?
Yeah, so as you'll be aware, in terms of the overall fees, these have been discussed with the PSAA. Some of them have been obviously set by the PSAA in relation to the old MCA fee, which has been uplifted for inflation and the inclusion now of the ISA 315 revised fee that was set as a fee variation in the past. The fee obviously also includes the additional PTE fee that was agreed in the last year following integration that wasn't put into formal fee consultations within the PSAA, but it has been discussed with the PSA throughout and they're in agreement. That fee is likely to fall down over the next couple of years. The SIFTL fee obviously is a separate commercial body, so that will be agreed with management as we progress throughout the process and determine after the first year how long that audit really should take. Obviously it's a bit more complicated in the first year in terms of the setup of the accounts and making sure that everything's in line with audit and standards. From the police point of view, yes, so at this stage that represents the police fee from last year uplifted in line with all other local government contracts at the same percentage level. At this stage in the first year, following discussions with management in terms of the level of integration of policies, procedures, systems, processes, it ostensibly is two completely separate audits. So the audits are being completed as if they were two separate organisations due to the way that the operations take place. However, I do see as time goes forward and there is further integration and learnings from both the audit processes that we will be able to bring that fee down and make sure that it actually represents the value required to actually complete the work and not as two distinct audits, which essentially is what's happening at the minute.
And SIFTL's companies act audit, you're okay changing the figures to local government?
Yeah.
Hi, James. Questions about materiality, and I can see the group materiality. The police fund is separate to that, isn't it? It's a different materiality number.
Yeah, so in the final group plans is going to expand quite significantly for the consideration of the entire group. As part of that, there will be several pages that lay out the different levels of materiality that we've got for each component that we'll be auditing.
Thank you, Chair. And just one minor point, but to prove that we've read the report. I appreciate this report was prepared for the meeting in June, which we're going to have. the dates will need changing to reflect in the record when we discussed it, that's all. Thank you.
I did notice that on the train on the way over, and I thought, I'll wait to see who picks it up. But yeah, no, thanks very much. It's always useful when it's draft. I can make those type of changes, no problem. Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Should have had my microphone on when I said that. Nothing further. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to internal audit plan, please, Sarah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the first report is our annual report. So this summarises all the work that we've performed in 24-25 and then gives you an overall annual opinion on risk management, governance and the overall control framework. The key to the document is on page 289, which is the opinion itself. That's an amber opinion, it's a positive opinion, it's the second highest tier that we actually give overall. What that actually means is, based on the work that we've performed during the course of the year, we believe there is an adequate and effective control framework. However, as you would expect as well, there are some areas of improvement. That links to the number of management actions that we've agreed per audit during the course of the year. So how we've actually derived that opinion, there was 10 assurance reviews performed during the course of the year. Of those 10, 3 were substantial opinions, which is the highest opinion that we give. 7 was reasonable, so that's the second tier down. So out of the 10, all 10 were positive opinions overall. We've taken into consideration the follow-up as well, so that's the implementation of previously agreed management actions, important part of the process, and just ensures that we're closing the loop. Both of those were reasonable assurance opinions again, so positive. And then there was one advisory that we do take into consideration as well, but it doesn't feature that heavily when we give the overall opinion. All actions, we're pleasing to note, have been agreed with the management team that we've raised during the course of the year. Also pleasing to note is there was no high priority actions that have been picked up as well. So I think from our perspective it was relatively clear that it was going to be a positive opinion. Based on the 7 reasonable, it was probably going to be the 7 second tier down as well, which is how we actually derived the opinion overall. The remainder of the document just gives some information with regards to the added value that you've got from RSM during the course of the year. It demonstrates there's been no conflicts of interest that we needed to report at this committee and delivering this opinion overall. It does confirm our compliance with internal audit standards as well, and public sector internal audit standards. There is a section with regards to how we've performed during the course of the year with our KPIs. Again, from our perspective, pleasing to know all those were well within target. That's mainly around issuing draft reports and final reports to management team. So I think from my perspective, overall, a very strong result, a strong opinion that's been given. We do appreciate there's a lot going on in the MCA as well. So I do thank management for giving us the time to actually deliver on this to get us through to the process, because obviously without working with them we wouldn't be delivering the opinion and we wouldn't have delivered the plan in full. So we do appreciate that. It certainly makes our life a lot easier during the course of the year as well. So I will pause there and see if there's any specific questions on the 24-25 annual opinion, Chair.
Comments or questions from members? No?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So then we move on to agenda item 16. We have got a series of reports. I know one of these is confidential, so I'll stop after when we get to that point, Chair. So the first report, as I say, I'll take those as read, is the recruitment and selection process. Why we put this review in was following implementation of a new system, Pinpoint, so we thought it was a timely review to perform. The conclusion overall was a reasonable assurance, again positive opinion, and that was on the basis that we raised 4 medium action points, and also we raised 1 suggestion as well, so that's something for management to consider. Pleasing to know that all those 5 points have been agreed with the management team. You'll see from the implementation date there was 31st of July, so at the end of this month all those should have been actioned and taken forward. I think it's also worth mentioning as well that a number of these points had already been picked up prior to the audit by the management team, and they'd started taking action to address those, which I think is part of the reason why we've got a 31st of July implementation for them, so obviously a quick turnaround. Just quickly, the 4 mediums then. Policy with regards to policies and procedures, obviously a new system, you need to make sure those are updated. Those had already been drafted, so it's a case of just approving those and then obviously rolling them out to the management team. And also then there was a point with regards to training as well for hiring managers. That again, that had been planned, but at the time the audit had not been delivered. So there's a recommendation in there, and then obviously doing refresher courses just to keep everyone up to date on what's going ahead. We did pick up a point with regards to shortlisting candidates. What we identified is there was a lack of evidence for scoring candidates. Obviously that would help with consistency in approach, but it also would help you if there's any challenge as well coming back from any specific candidates. The fourth point, again, this was very similar to the last one, with regards to interviews. There was an absence of interview scoring cards on file and no sign-off by the panel that was doing the interview. Again, this comes back to it would help if there's any specific challenge to understand why specific candidates didn't get through in comparison to some of the others. It's also obviously very good practice as well as part of the process. So when we did the debrief, there was no surprises to the management team on these points. I say a couple had already been addressed. So again, overall, a good, strong, positive result, especially for something that had been changed with regards to systems and so forth. You would have tended to find a few more coming out of those. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on the sample that you've done around selection for both shortlisting and the interviews, was there any, because they've both been said that the sample predated the current process, so would there be any sample within that current process that you could have done? Because I guess it feels like we've looked at the things before the process. Is there actually poor that we could have sampled in that new process now?
No, because not everything had gone live at the time of performing the review with regards to the rollout of the new systems as well. So what we would do is when we do part of the follow-up of these actions, we would then pick up as part of the new system as well. But at this time, it was really kicking the tyres on the old system to find out if there was any weaknesses that management hadn't identified of the rollout of the new system. Okay, if we're on to the second...
Sorry, I just want to remind members that we're going to change the order so that item 16 becomes 17, and just for the purpose of turning the feed off.
Okay. Okay. So the next report is the risk management. This was specific to the tram. The objective of this review was just to look at the integration of the tram business, just confirming that they were managing their risk, but also how he was actually adopting the risk management of the MCA as well. The conclusion on this one was a reasonable assurance, only 1 medium action and 3 low. Again, all agreed by the management team. Again, a quick implementation date of the 31st of June. So just the 1 medium. The tram just doesn't currently have a documented process with regards to assurance mapping. These do help the board, they help the management to understand where you are getting assurances from, but also more importantly if there's any gaps in that assurance as well. So an assurance map would help that going forward. They are looking to actually adopt the MCAs as well, so you're not actually reinventing the wheel from scratch. And I say the 3 other low priority points, they were general points that we tend to pick up with regards to implementation dates being missed, checking risk scores are correct, and obviously doing the job with regards to the inherent risk and residual risk. So again, overall strong result, but an assurance map, as I say, would strengthen that overall process with regards to risk management, which say management are taking on board. So I'll pause there for any questions.
Thank you. In terms of looking at jobs that there are in the organisation, is there any evidence that we delineate some as being safety critical?
That would be management.
Sorry, Paul, could you just elaborate?
In some organisations,
Yeah.
some jobs are designated as safety critical because they impinge on the operations of the organisation, and if those aren't properly managed, then there's an increase in the inherent risk. And along with having safety critical jobs, you get additional responsibilities in terms of drugs and alcohol, how you present at work, training and things like that. Especially within the tram, have we got any posts that have been identified in that way and are subject to special review?
I think, as we heard earlier, and this is a high-level understanding, so we probably do need to follow up for you, there are definitely roles within the tram operating company that are essentially flagged for additional assurance, and that's why we have drivers who are subject to a mandatory testing regime and the like. Within the MCA, I'm not aware that we do, largely because of the functions that we have, but I can certainly speak to HR colleagues and just test that one.
Yeah, I think that would be useful. I can see from what you're saying, Gareth, that it's mainly within SIFTL that we've got that requirement. Because that has a key bearing on the culture of the organisation, I think. If people recognise the additional responsibility there is around the role. And it can quite often be clerical roles, people who are rostering people for duties, to making sure they've got proper rest in between when they're turning up for work. Back to comments somebody made about how do you know someone's fit to work. And I think I've read somewhere that I think you're going to get a non-executive onto the board of SIFTL who's got light rail experience, which I think would aid you tremendously in developing that safety culture within the organisation.
So that's right. So we held a spot on the operating company board for an independent. We said we'd wait a while to fill that so that we were clearer what we were looking for when we were going out to market, and I think we're on with that recruitment now, so hopefully we'll have it landed by the end of the summer.
Wider organisation. We did actually identify, there was no way to identify if people had received the health and safety training they needed for their specific role. Again, further investigation, that was due to a lack of documented training requirements for each role, so it wasn't similar to the point you've just mentioned there, that there was a lack of understanding of what that training needed to be provided, so obviously then you can't provide the training to those individuals. This has been picked up and it was actually built into the tender spec for finding a new training provider. So again, as that gets handed over, that action should be pretty much addressed and developed and moved forward. Monthly site inspections and risk assessments. There's checklists that are used, but we did identify that they're actually not used to document where actions have been identified. Obviously a big risk from this point of view is that there's no clear way to monitor and track those actions and confirm that they have been actually completed and signed off. The other point was with regards to similar vein with regards to risk assessments. We've made a point that you actually do need to assign an owner and a target date for all actions that have been identified as part of a risk assessment process, otherwise they could fall on the back burner and again not get addressed. You can't do the monitoring to inform that they've been actioned and implemented and taken forward. And then there was the fifth one with regards to, we did find weaknesses around the actually reporting of incidents as well, but again management have already developed a new framework and control process with regards to taking that forward. They will be using the new system as well for reporting and logging as well. So again, overall, a positive result. It was expected that we would pick up some issues. It was expected that management would have already picked up some of those issues as well. But as I mentioned, it was a case of actually just trying to identify whether third party could identify issues that's not been addressed by the management team. for when you roll out the new system. So I'll pause there, Chair, for any questions on that one.
Yeah, my question's on the first medium one, which is about the policy. Is there any way of tracking how many people have actually read the policy? And then is there another way of tracking when that policy is updated, whether people have read it again? Because clearly it's an important thing in terms of health and safety legislation as to whether they know what the policy is or not.
Well, firstly, it's probably just before Gareth jumps in, they won't have read that policy yet because that's not being rolled out. That's the new policy, but I don't know if you've got...
I don't think we do track. I think it's probably a fair point that who has read the policy. I think we put an onus on the dissemination of that down through leadership teams. So it's signed off at the exec leadership teams. I know in my space it goes through the director leadership team down to individual functional areas. It's probably a good point, a bit of best practice that we could pick up though. So we'll take that away. Yeah, thank you. Good.
One way of doing it is to get people to agree the policy on the intranet when they log in to the intranet. Doesn't always mean that they've read it, but it does mean that they've agreed to abide by it.
Yeah, I think I probably just do need to check with HR teams, but I'm fairly certain it's part of the induction process where we things like cyber security policies that we ask people to sign up to on day one, and acceptable use policies and the like. So I think we probably do catch new starters. It's whether we're refreshing that every year thereafter.
Dave and Paul.
Yeah, thank you for these. It's more a question for Gareth probably than you. There's sort of commendably short dates for the implementation of quite a lot of these actions, some of which have already passed. I appreciate you will follow up implementation and you follow up reports annually, but that's probably going to be later in the year. Is there must be, I assume, is there some sort of system internally that you track implementation of these sort of actions before sort of 12 months' time or 9 months' time when internal audit come back?
So it comes through to exec leadership board monthly just to follow up on audit actions, and we, again, just in my space, which this will land, we are tracking this through our directorate leadership team too, so there is quite a lot of attention on this. I think we always have a challenge back with officers about being realistic about their audit implementation actions. Clearly people just want to get on with it and get them done. I think in this instance, as our SAM colleagues have mentioned, we were quite aware of some of the failings in the existing process, and we've invested quite heavily into new systems and people, and there's been an awful lot more management attention. So we're hopeful that the new system that we will put in place will give us the rigour and the reporting and tracking mechanisms to do this that's offline or has been offline previously. So that should hopefully just give us that ongoing systematization of how we're handling this, rather than it being slightly ad hoc as it has been in the past.
And just following up on the effectiveness of the training and policies we've got, is there any of the training modules, do they have quizzes, tests in them, questions that people have to answer, and can you then go back and see what answers they gave?
Yeah, our online training is always finishes with a quiz. So I quite often personally, pride myself on getting 100% and then not talking about it when I get 85 or whatever. But I think the way that the current system works is that it requires you to recomplete the test, and it records if there is a failure rather than the individual results. So I think the pass rate on most of them is around 90%. So it simply will not allow you to mark it as complete until you've got through the test again. So you go back to the beginning and keep going. So we do track completion of training, testing, and colleagues in my directorate will love my snitch list that comes around monthly, which is following up with those who haven't completed their training. So that would include those who've undertaken the training but failed the test. So.
Next item's private.
So we're now live again, and we'll take the transport risk report verbal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. We're trialling a new format at Transport and Risk Working Group. We've changed the terms of reference to refer to a more generic report that needs to be presented to the group rather than focusing on one specific one. And we've extended the time by 30 minutes because we've found previously that we can't do justice to each topic in the time available. Consequent with that, we have offered officers that we will run to a timetabled agenda so that they don't have to be there for the whole of the 90 minutes. They can just come for the particular items that they're involved for. However, as we know in the past, some individuals have said that they, I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but they value being at TRWG because they get to find out what's going on in the rest of the organisation, which is a nice plus point, but I'm sure there must be equally effective ways of communication within the organisation rather than having to come to this group. In terms of the content of what we discussed, there were no significant movements in the risk ratings. A couple of points that I would want to draw to the committee, and I know Councillor Levery has one that he wants to raise as well. First of all, on the declining bus patronage risk that's been identified before, I think members of the group make clear that we like to get to understand the causes of the decline in bus usage, which seems to be absent in the risk analysis that we've received. And officers understood that point, and they've gone away and promised to come back with an analysis by local authority Borough to show whether or not there's a decline across all 4 constituent authorities or whether or not it's in particular authorities. There was a suggestion that it had gone down in Sheffield but up in Doncaster. So they're going to come back with some numbers on that, which I think will be most useful. They did point out that at the moment data quality is poor due to the reluctance of bus companies to share their data with us, and that's holding back developing policies. Before I go on to bus franchising, Councillor Levery, do you want to raise the issue concern you'd got on SIFTL?
Yes, it's due to an issue with tyres for the tram, and a situation arose where there were insufficient tyres to keep the full fleet operation, and it had to be reduced. Now this is a fairly significant issue because we would expect you would have wheel sets tied up ready to do a change if a tram needed to have a new set of tyres fitted. So my question really was, and concern is, if this has happened before we start refurbishing these tram sets and taking them out of service, we're going to go to a reduced number of trams, and we really need to make sure that all aspects of the maintenance of the fleet are covered off to ensure that the fleet can continue running. So what sort of stock do they carry on tyres and other key elements of maintaining the tram network, and what are the mitigations in place should they not achieve, should you end up with a reduction in service because SIFTL haven't actually maintained the tram fleet where you want it to be? Thank you.
Yeah, and to whom are you addressing that question?
I can take it if that would be helpful. So I have some knowledge of this issue and my current role of chairing the tram company board. I think we've previously informed the committee there was an investigation undertaken within the company that reported back to the board and back into the MCA, and Mike's just checking whether we actually brought that back through to the committee, but if we haven't, we can do. I think the high level answer to this at this point was that there were a number of failings that touched upon the monitoring regime that was testing the availability and the of stock, but also the wear and tear, and then there were failings within the procurement process. It took too long to deliver, but there were equally failings in terms of the reporting of this issue through to the company board and through to the MCA. So the first time we became aware of this was when things went wrong at company board. Now, I'd expect to have had sight of that earlier, but it didn't bubble through the risk register. It wasn't on the management reports that the board was receiving, so there were some failures on that. So that review is concluded. We've already implemented a number of changes around the procurement processes. Part of that was just reiterating how procurement should work for a publicly controlled company, and that was reinforcing points to officers within the company that safety critical items can be expedited through procurement processes where necessary, but equally there were recommendations that are being implemented quite quickly because they are simple to do around stock control issues, escalation of matters around that to the management team, and from the management team through to the company board and through to the MCA. The really simple point is that we should be keeping spares available, and as we enter into a period of further disruption where we might be taking trams out of service because we're doing significant work on them, we'll clearly need to be carrying more spares than we otherwise would. It's not simply a question of managing this through on the vehicles themselves, but it also relates to track. So on the risk register, when we get to it, I think there is an item that we're bubbling up through risk reporting now, again about access to critical elements of track. So at various points across the network, we have manganese crossing points. Manganese is much harder wearing metal than the regular steel that we use for other parts of the track. Now, because it's hard wearing and because it's niche, because you have to engineer specific elements, it does mean that it's hard to procure and to secure those bits of track in a really timely manner. So this is very much on our radar now, looking ahead at potential issues ahead of the much larger re-railing programme. So I think my key takeaway is there were lessons to be learned that we didn't realise needed to be learned, because I think we probably had an assumption that this was standard business as usual practice. I think we've learned the hard way because of the tram wear and tear issues. Some of this is easy to fix. Some of it, particularly around track, might be harder to fix in a timely manner because there are simply lead times to buying this sort of stuff. But we've picked it up and we're on with it, and we're trying to get ahead of that now. The point about the increase in risk exposure as we get into the renewal cycle is known and understood, and that's part of our thinking about how we use the money that is available to us to build up a mitigation reserve. We've secured agreement from the Department of Transport to take £5 million of the 100 million that we just secured in the last week, and hold that as a risk contingency simply for failing assets, that we can start preemptively building up stores and resilience to future issues. So I think the point's really well made. It's one that we picked up. If we've not brought you the updates on the results of the internal investigation that we did, then we can have a company officer come and talk to the committee.
I was going to suggest, Councillor, if it's helpful, we either bring it to Transport Risk Working Group or to the September board. Haven't been able to find the minutes at this meeting where it took place. I'm just checking in at the moment to see when we report it to the SIFTL board, and it might be helpful to then have that discussion at Transport Risk Working Group, if that's helpful.
Are we looking at all SIFTL spares and maintenance regime in terms of this in advance of carrying out the major capital refurb?
So absolutely yes. So this was one of the lessons learned that Gareth was referring to, and the managing director recognised this as a failing of SIFTL. So he's brought in additional resource to focus in on the interface between engineering and procurement, because he's clearly observed that there was a failing between the two teams of talking to each other. So that's one of the areas of where the consultant's focusing at the moment.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Livery. In terms of the other items we discussed, bus franchising was one risk which we went through in some detail, and I think the key point for the committee to note from this is the potential difficulty in resourcing the project team. There are 4 to 5 other authorities who are going ahead with franchising at the same time, and this is putting some pressure on the amount of expertise that's in the market, which is likely to involve cost pressures to us when we go to recruit people, if indeed you can get hold of them. Now the good news is that where possible, I think the authorities are beginning to cooperate with one another and avoid duplication. But sometimes, because of the sensitivity of what's happened in developing their own franchises, they're reluctant to perhaps share all their experience. So that's something we need to look at very carefully. And although franchising seems to be relatively well down the track, as it were, in terms of the preliminary work that we've got to do to get there, we need to be on with that fairly quickly. So I think these problems could manifest themselves very shortly. I think it's generally this whole point about procurement with limited resources in the market, lots of demand for them, and as you've pointed out, Gareth, sometimes long lead times to get them. That I think is a key risk that we need to keep our eyes on.
I think that's a point really well made, and we are all keen to reiterate into this organisation that whilst franchising might feel a way off in 2027, actually when you reverse the critical path back, it is now, that we need to be on with this. The points about access to skills, capability, capacity, again is well made, and I guess there's 2 pinch points. One is that franchising is relatively new, so it's not like lots of people have done this before who have a body of experience and know how to do it. The second point is that we are now in a cohort along with a whole bunch of other people who are trying to do it at the same time. So there's probably a limited pool of people who have experience, and then a large pool of people trying to grab that experience, and that's a slight challenge. We recently recruited someone in from Greater Manchester who's helping us on some of this, who you may have met. And I think we are starting to see slight changes in the market as well. So there was previously been a relatively small pool in terms of professional advisors who were active in this space. I think because the market is now seeing that there is a larger opportunity as more people congregate into it, with potentially more to come, the private sector is gearing towards being able to help in that. So we're seeing new market entrants who could potentially help us with this work. There is a need to get on with this now, and just yesterday I was with Catherine, the new chief exec, having a deep dive on the programme plan. And I can assure you there is a huge programme plan that's about 6 foot tall, if you were to look at it printed out, about what we need to do. There's a lot that needs to happen in a sort of functional space around the projects, but the bit that we are really keen to pick up wider in the organisation is that corporate services need to mobilise to support the project. So, really simple point that if you need to recruit a load of people into the franchising team itself, you need to staff up your HR team to allow that to happen in the first place, and your IT team needs to be able to sort of kit and equipment and be able to support growing changes. So we've done an exercise internally within corporate services to determine what we need to crack on and help that project to deliver. And we've allocated resource from our transition reserve to help with that, and we're on with getting those posts in. So I think the need to progress, the criticality of getting people in quickly is well understood. There's still a latent challenge about how fast we can do that.
We had a discussion about how we start in terms of franchising on the ground or what it looks like, and the view was that we would start with what we've got and develop from there, which in my experience that there are certain parts of the county where people have just got out of using buses because the service is so poor. And how are we going to get people wanting to use buses again, and in particular taking them to places they want to go, rather than, for example, in Sheffield is a Spug and Hoats. It's a hub and spoke system, and it's an hour and a half to get into town on a bus, and people just don't go there. They'll get a taxi to Hillsborough and do the shopping there instead, because they can't get a bus to Hillsborough, if you see what I mean. And how are we going to actually revive the bus service through franchising that ensures that it's going to where people want to go, and we're having a look at that?
I think that's the million-dollar question, which is part of the franchise assessment work that we did. I guess the starting point for us is we've had close to 40 years of the current deregulated model, and we won't fix it on day one of franchising. It will take quite a long time to get it to the place we want it to be. We're taking the important first step now. I think we want to iterate through this process because we recognise that to answer the question that you set us will take us some time, and part of that is about getting data. So one of the challenges right now is that, and I think we referred to it earlier, about the willingness or otherwise of operators to share data. We're not entirely sure where people are travelling. We're not entirely sure where their journeys originate, where they're going to. We're not entirely sure about whether they feel like they're paying an appropriate price for that service and so on. We've done high-level surveys, that supported the decision to franchise. But to properly understand where people need to travel and where they would like to go, to make sure that we've got a responsive network, we'll need to do a whole piece of work to gather a significant amount of data, and then to do a network optimization piece of work. Now, that will take a number of years based on what we understand from other areas. That could be a significant data-led exercise, but really importantly, and the Mayor's really keen on this, is about engaging with communities as well. So that's one of his principles, is how we involve people in the design of the network, rather than us on a technocratic basis simply designing something that we think makes sense for a transport network. So that will take us time. How we entice people on is we've increased reliability. So one of the immediate points that we should be able to support through franchise from day one onwards is supporting the reliability of the network. Too often services don't turn up or turn up late. How can we best support that? Now, we can manage that into the future through a franchise network because we contract with people, so we can manage the incentivization and any sort of punitive penalties that we contract for. We can also better engage with people, so again, how we market, how we publicise, how we propagate the benefits of the public transport network will be in our gift. Right now we are quite passive in that space because the risk reward is with the operators. We'll also have our hand on the lever in terms of pricing and ticket policies. So again, it's a very fragmented system right now. I personally pay a different price for my bus journey into work depending on which operator I get on, and then something again on tram if I need to get up to Cllr for work or go meet my wife up there. So we will be able to implement, hopefully, more coherent and more attractive pricing and ticketing strategies that will be in our gift today. And then there is simply the customer experience part of this as well. So we've appointed a director who's incredibly capable of supporting me on some airport work at the moment, who will be looking at the customer experience of bus users into the future. And that can be from the quality of the interchange, including perceptions around safety. So we know from our surveys that vulnerable people, women, youngsters often feel at risk in the interchanges. We had the health and safety point earlier. We can look at, well, we are looking at what we can do in that space. And as part of our financial model going forward, we're looking at whether there is resource that we could make available to invest more into that space than we do currently. The proposition around the vehicles that people travel in is incredibly important. Again, we know, because we can see the data, that the average life of a bus in South Yorkshire is around 12 to 13 years on a life expectancy of 15 years. So anecdotally, we all see it, we all hear it. There are a lot of dirty diesels running around in this region. Our proposition through the franchise assessment would be that over 30% of the initial tranche of vehicles that we buy will be electric vehicles. They will be cleaner, they'll be greener, they will be more safe and comfortable to ride in. You won't be sat on a rattling bus that's lurching around corners in the same way that we do currently. We will replace the entire bus stock, I think within 15 years, Mike, is that right? So all buses will be replaced in the near term, and that's part of our proposal to invest around 350 million of the what is now called City Region Transport Grant. I forget the name of it.
Transport City Region. TCR.
TCR. They've changed the name. Department of Transport have changed the name of the grant stream again. But we will be investing up to 350 million. A lot of that is going into new vehicles. So better ticketing, better engagement, a better customer experience, new vehicles, and then in time we'll have the data set and the understanding to replan the network, and a replan network should start to answer some of the questions about, are we going to the places people want to go to? How do we tie that together for a proper integrated transport network that links in with tram, so that we take competition away from the tram, and then any conversations about tram expansion into the future can be properly framed within what a bus network is doing. So there is a lot that we can do early doors. There is a lot that we will need to iterate through, but the franchise assessment that we undertook has a very simple logic that control allows you more levers to do that than the system that we have currently, where we're in a relatively passive role and we're entirely reliant on others to deliver our objectives.
So I'm going to allow Paul to finish the report, Paul, and then I'll bring people in, otherwise it might take forever.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to say, Gareth, based on what you've said, that suggests then that our contract term for the initial franchising we do needs to be carefully thought about, because otherwise we could end up paying for something we don't want, or it'll be expensive to change it midway through. But as Chair says, let's move on. In terms of what else we discussed, we moved on to delivery of investment schemes. This was the first time we'd had a look at those schemes which were delivered by partner local authorities. And we dipped our toes into that. There were no schemes that were highlighted to us of being concern for officers. Where some schemes have been running late, like in the Transforming Cities Fund, which I think is still TCF, they've been moved into the CRSTS programme to be able to stay within the necessarily funding contracts. We also met the new Capital Delivery Director and talked about those schemes which the SIMCA is delivering. In particular, the tram renewal. He's doing a thorough review of that tram programme delivery, and he'll come back to us as soon as that's complete. So those were the key items that we had. Happy to take any questions or deal with any issues. Thank you.
I think mine's more for Gareth as well. Having been around 40 years ago when buses were deregulated, actually working in the industry for 15 years after that in my IT capacity, I know how long it took to get scheduling and route design software in place. So have you begun looking at that kind of thing?
I'll certainly take that away and check, Steve. One thing that's obviously been recognised by the project is that networks is a key work stream. So they're in the process of recruiting a permanent person to come in as head of franchise networks, and they're actually just got in for approval to appoint an external party, Sistra, to come in and fill on an interim basis, which then the permanent person can then take over. So that will keep the momentum going. I think, Steve, as well, just reflection from discussions I've had with Commercial Director Alexander Dennis, for example, that a number of the new, a number of the operators, manufacturers in the space of EV, as a part of the package of buying the bus, they do offer software which helps you to work out, based on the topography, like Sheffield or otherwise, what you can expect out of the bus, what the optimum routes might be, and pulling together all the data. So it's quite exciting actually how much tech has advanced, and the fact that it's being offered potentially as a part of the service when you buy a bus.
Yeah, I think I was at the start of tech, but the topography of Sheffield is really important because you need lower gearing buses for certain different parts of the city, don't you? So that is really a quite interesting point. The other thing, the hub and spoke models changed a little bit now because you do have some cross-city routes, whereas at one point in time you never had cross-city routes. It was always hub and spoke. So yeah, the complexity is never to be underestimated of getting all this stuff on. There's a limited number of operators that might come into the model, and back in my day, most of the scheduling software was US based. It might have changed significantly since then, but that's where we used to have to buy all our stuff from.
As you'd expect, we're staffing up now with people who can talk about this with much more authority. But we're also talking to Greater Manchester, who often in these cases are going first and doing some bits really well and some bits really badly, and we follow in their trail and pick up the learning on the way through. The Northern Mayors are also incredibly keen that where possible we are thinking about common procurement practices on some of this, so rather than us all buying individually, we're all trying to roughly do the same thing. So there are a number of groups that are looking at the opportunity for collaboration in that space, and things like network design and management are part of that consideration.
Nothing more to add. Thank you.
Thank you. So, welcome back from lunch, and we start with item 17 on the agenda. Consultation and Engagement Framework. Liam. Hi.
Hello everyone, I'm Liam Ronan-Clond, I'm Director of Strategic Partnerships. So I'm asking committee to note this statement of intent for engagement. It's been brought to committee in light of the Governance Improvement Plan, which included a recommendation for an engagement plan at SIMCA. And there's a number of reasons why now as well. The Mayor's shown commitment to engagement as part of his manifesto, but also part of the corporate plan. There's the evolution, the integrated settlements, the timing's quite important as well to make sure that we get that right in time for integrated settlement next year. And then in general, it's an opportunity to strengthen agency and deepen democracy in South Yorkshire as well. So I just wanted to clarify what the statement is and isn't. This is a statement of ambition and intent. It's not a strategy. It acts as a foundation for developing a more comprehensive strategy in 2026. And I'm aware as well, and I'll be using the term engagement a lot, and the document uses the term engagement a lot, so I just wanted to define what I meant by that. And also a correction, I should probably have stated external engagement, because this is about connecting with partners, with residents, to inform the decisions that we make here at CMCA. And also in the document, I've sort of defined the limitations and differences as well between sort of legal versus non-statutory engagement as well. The statement of intent looks at how we engage and who we engage with, how we can learn lessons from existing engagement activities that have gone well or maybe not so well, what an ethical approach to engagement looks like, a draft set of principles and expectations in the way we might engage in future, how we can empower residents and partners, clarity on the amount of influence that people might have on different decisions, so really sort of setting where those limits might be so that we're not over-promising, and also our commitment to equality, diversity, inclusion. And as you'll see in the document, some of that we had some conversations to shape the statement of intent with a number of partners, a wide spread of partners, but including universities, local authority partners, voluntary sector, integrated care board, looked at what the existing challenges were, what the opportunities were, and we got a lot of interesting feedback, a lot of it which is stated in the report, so I'll leave that for you to ask further questions on. And that has helped shape some of the principles and some of the recommendations within the report of what might be included in a more comprehensive engagement strategy in 2026. And then just in terms of next steps, I've been presenting the statement of intent to stakeholders who have helped to shape the statement of intent, so getting back to them so they know how their feedback was used, which is actually one of the recommendations, so you said we did, trying to provide that feedback loop. Also, we'll be working with the Business Advisory Board, the Children's the Youth Combined Authority, voluntary sector to continue those conversations. We're also working with People's Services on learning and development to try and embed that culture shift that I think needs to take place at CMCA in terms of being more proactive on engagement. And then also, we've had funding recently approved by the Mayoral Delivery Plan to build an engagement team. So that's the next steps on recruitment as well. So yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions, please? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, Liam. How are we going to measure the level of engagement that we're getting from the public, and have we got any external partners, and have we got any past data that we can use to compare against to say this approach is working better than what we've done before?
Yeah, that's something that we look at. So in the statement of intent, sort of sets out how we might measure success, and a little bit more work needs to be done on that. Because frankly, there isn't a sort of central data resource where all consultation and engagement data comes into. So that's something that we need to create. One of the examples that I'm looking at is the Insights Bank that I think the Integrated Care Partnership is using, which is a fantastic resource. How can we potentially work with them, do something initially at CMCA? But yeah, and in terms of leveraging our data as well and trying to sort of de-silo that data is something that we really need to work on. But so far, we do have some recent measures of success with the bus franchise consultation and the dogs on trams consultation that yielded some, high feedback scores in the thousands. So there's some recent examples of digital surveys that we can use as a bit of a recent benchmark.
Thank you.
Yes, Steve.
Hi, Liam. Thanks for the report. Really good. I don't know whether I heard you say whether you'd worked with the police, because they've got a really good engagement strategy and they've got some measurements that come alongside theirs as well.
Yeah, good question. Indirectly work with the police through the police and crime team here. But yeah, working with the police will be, they're a key partner, so someone we will be working with further to develop the engagement strategy. Thank you.
I guess just a question about, I know you noted in the report about engaging with residents, and I guess that's the next stage that you're going on to. So I guess if you could just explain a bit more how you are going to be engaging with residents, and particularly how we make sure we capture all those hard to reach groups as well within the communities.
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, I think we have to figure out where we're best suited to engaging directly with residents. We've got some incredible skills and experience across the region with existing in local authorities and in the voluntary sector, and sometimes they're probably better suited to leading on that engagement in partnership with us. So rather than duplicating efforts, and doubling up, I think we're actually better working in partnership with those organisations to reach certain demographics. So for instance, certain groups that we might not have engaged with before or not have engaged with extensively before, there might be a charity or a community organisation that focuses solely on that group, and it might be better working with that charity or community organisation to engage with them. Does that help answer your question? Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, it's interesting. I was just reading on BBC News that the government have confirmed their intention to allow or to enable 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in future elections. And I know that some authorities have youth parliament members, for instance. How much work will you be doing in engaging that demographic?
Yeah, it's an important question, because from my experience in engagement, young people always need a sort of very specific, almost different approach to engagement, because what works for almost everyone else, you'll always have, when you look at the sort of demographic feedback, usually on a sort of digital survey that's gone out to everyone, the smallest group that's responded are the under 25s. So I've found that to make sure that you're yielding more results from the under 25s, you do something differently, whether that's going into schools, universities, whether that's running specific workshops, whether that's using rewards to sort of almost as a carrot for people to sort of get involved and have their say. It can be quite frustrating as well, can't it? Because a lot of the decisions that we're making are long term and will impact them in the future, and we really need to remember that, which is why we need to make that extra effort with that group to make sure that we get their valuable feedback. Oh, sorry, one more thing as well. I've already mentioned it, but to help shape the statement of intent, we spoke to the Youth Combined Authority, and we're also making another presentation to the Youth Combined Authority as well.
Thank you for that. Anything further? No, thank you. We welcome your report. Good luck ongoing.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Best wishes, whatever appropriate. Item 18 is Treasury Management Outturn.
Okay, so this is presenting the Treasury Management Outturn report for 24-25. Within this report, the Police Fund and the Mayoral Combined Authority are shown separately, and the Police Fund is post 7th of May. So key points in terms of the yearly performance, the investment income exceeded budget for both the Combined Authority and the Police Fund. The MCA had an investment income of 23 million against a budget of 10 million, and the PC Police Fund had outturn of 2 million against a budget of 1 million, and that's due to a combination of reasons. Basically, interest rates held up better than anticipated, and also the level of cash balances was higher than anticipated when the budget was set. During the year, no borrowing was required for either the police fund or the mayoral combined authority, but there was an increase in borrowing need for the police, and that was due to the capitalisation of legacy and pension abatement costs. In terms of looking forward in the report, the MCA isn't expected to have to borrow for at least the next 3 years and probably beyond that period. And the police fund, at the time the report was written, the police fund looked like it may need to borrow in 25-26, but looking at the current position, that's unlikely. But they may have to actually physically borrow funds in 26-27. In terms of the recommendations on the report, there are a number of recommendations. One of them is a change to the long-term investment limit. When the Treasury strategy was set, there was a limit set on how much we can invest beyond year end. 24-25 year end, we had significantly higher funds than expected. So basically, we've revised that limit to give us the ability to still invest funds past the end of the financial year. And that enables us to take advantage of higher, well, what we think might be higher interest rates now before interest rates fall, and then do some long-term investments based on that. There's also the prepayment of pension costs, which is being considered. That's for the police. There's a potential option to prepay the pension costs for 3 years. So that'd be paying £40 million, approximately £40 million up front in 2027. And that should be financially beneficial, because by prepaying the costs you get a reduction, and then you compare that to how much you'd get if you had that money invested, and it looks like prepaying that would be a reasonable thing to do, would be financially beneficial to prepay those pension costs. And also in the recommendations is a change to the narrative in the Treasury strategy about investing with foreign banks. The previous narrative said that it would need to be approved by MCA board if we were to do an investment with a foreign bank. I think that probably goes back to the whole Icelandic bank situation back in 2008. The amendment is that it could be approved by Gareth, but then we would have to report back as part of the quarterly reports to MCA board and the audit committee. It's basically just gives us the option to invest with a foreign bank without going to MCA board first, because foreign banks aren't inherently any more risky than UK banks. It all depends on the credit rating of the country, and the credit rating of the individual bank really determines the risk of the investment. They're the key recommendations. So really it's just asking audit committee to note the recommendations in the report. And any questions?
Yeah, thank you for that. On the prepayment, I know this is something that's been done for the last few years by quite a number of local authorities, so it's not actually that novel. But those local authorities have tended to cover themselves by getting a sort of legal opinion that it's the proper use of their funds to do this. Have we done that here, or have we relied on the fact that it's now sufficiently commonplace that we don't need to worry about that?
The latter. So we're working on precedent that we're doing things that our local authority partners have done previously, and I believe the police have done previously as well. So I don't think we saw any gain in re-seeking advice.
Okay. Do we know roughly how much it's likely to save us?
We do have a calculation. I think
you say 6% in the report.
I don't know. Yeah, I think it was about 6. I can't remember what the exact figure was. Owen's about to.
Yep. So it's to the benefit of £3.5 million over the 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
It's the equivalent yield differential between investing at roughly 4% in traditional investments, or 6 as a discount factor with the pension fund. The additional point, I guess, is that it really minimises counterparty risk. So if we were to invest in a money market fund or an investment with a bank elsewhere, we inevitably carry counterparty risk. If we're simply paying up front a liability that we'll always have to pay anyway, that counterparty risk doesn't exist, so we get better yield with less risk, which strikes me as inherently sensible.
Yeah, you mentioned that police don't look as though they're going to have to borrow this year, but year after that, are we still looking at borrowing from MCA funds to meet that need?
Yeah, so our first protocol is, do we have cash within the group, and would that be a more efficient use of our resource than going externally? So we would be able to set up a transaction where essentially police funds paid the MCA general fund for the use of its cash, and that would avoid us losing money to banks and external agencies.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the investments outside the UK, what's the sort of differential in interest rates then that we're seeing? How much extra
at the moment, there isn't a huge, I mean, it would depend on the individual bank. So it's not really something we're looking to do imminently. It's just to provide the option. And I know that some of the foreign banks are potentially, I don't know, the Bank of Qatar, whether we'd want to invest with Bank of Qatar is, is questionable. But it's just really to, if the rates were higher than UK banks, which they have been at times in the past, just to have that option to do it without having to go to MCA board to get approval.
I guess the ancillary point as well, Ian, is, as you'll all be well versed in, our hierarchy of considerations is security, liquidity and yield. So it's not necessarily that we're chasing yield in a foreign country because it's higher. That's how people got into trouble in Iceland. It's simply that if we're carrying significant cash balances, eventually we start to get nervous about how much we might have with any one individual, say UK bank, and actually it might be better to spread our risk by investing an amount into a foreign bank rather than just keep doubling down on UK banks. So we have a bigger, wider portfolio which allows us to disperse that risk across more counterparties.
And presumably the institutions which we engage with, we'd be testing those against our standard rules.
Yeah, we have Treasury advisors that give us all the credit ratings on all the foreign banks and the actual national credit ratings. So there are other countries that have higher credit ratings than the UK and foreign banks that have higher credit ratings than UK banks. And we get all that information from the Treasury advisors.
Is that AAA we look for?
They wouldn't, there are some AAA countries, but in terms of banks, I think our minimum is A-, but most, but within our Treasury strategy we do have, off the top of my head, I can't remember, but we do have a minimum national credit rating that a country has to be, and then a minimum bank rating that the bank would have to be.
Right.
I think it's AA-.
AA-, is it? Right, thank you. Final question, I don't expect the answer now, but it'd be helpful to know, if we could, how much of the extra money we've earned on interest is down to rates, because they're higher than what we forecast, and how much is down to the amount of cash we're holding, because I noticed in the accounts that we did earlier that there's a 21% slippage in the capital programme, which has presumably generated more cash for us to look after. So just some rough feeling for, I think it's 13 million extra we've got.
I can do that calculation.
Yeah,
I mean, looking at the budget was 10 million at 3%, so that assumed an average level of investment of 300 million, where we actually had an average level of investments of 495 million. But I can do a calculation where it tries to split how much is due to the interest rate, how much is due to sort of additional funds.
Thank you, that'd be helpful.
Cool, thanks, Chair. Just a couple of questions for me. In terms of the Treasury management function and that now being brought in-house, I guess it's just reassurance that was that done on a like-for-like basis? We've got enough resource and knowledge within that team as it currently stands. And then the other one was just around, again, picking up on the investments outside of the UK. I guess therefore we'll have to start to manage an FX risk on that potentially, or not. And is there any sort of specific limits that we should be placing on the amount that we do outside of the UK versus the UK to sort of maintain a comfortable split between them if necessary.
So we don't invest in foreign currencies, so these would all be sterling denominated transactions. And that's, foreign banks have a need for sterling in the same way that UK banks have a need for dollars and so on. So we never carry that forex risk. Just in terms of bringing the service back in-house, there's been benefits in having the service with Sheffield City Council, and I think they've done a really good job for us actually over the last few years. The principal reason for bringing it back was we feel we've reached critical mass now, where actually it's better to have a more agile, responsive in-house service. We're really lucky to have a bunch of people within this organisation who have an awful lot of Treasury experience, and that's quite unusual. So I was a former Treasury manager, at Sheffield City Council. I hold a post-qualification qualification in international Treasury management. So ultimately I'm responsible for all this, and I've got the sort of maximum public sector TM qualification you can get. Ian's done this at Rotherham, Owen's done this at Rotherham, Simon Tompkins has done this in previously and audited, so we've actually got a really quite good spectrum of people with expertise in this area. I think probably more so than in other spaces. So it's one of the reasons why we've, with the support of our colleagues over in Sheffield, that we've been able to accrue quite significant returns over the last few years. The bit that we really need to get better at is some of the forecasting. And that's again why I think it makes sense to bring it in-house, because you bring the transactions closer to the budget management. That gives us a better shot at working out what the maximum, or working out what our returns should be, and making sure that we're on the nose about when we are pivoting our investment strategy in the way that we're trying to do right now. And that's always a little bit of a failing when you outsource this. The guys actually having the intelligence on what the market's doing don't have the intelligence on what your budget and your capital programs are doing. And as much as you can work well together, joining that bit of the conversation up is often harder. Whereas Owen and Ian and Mike will know every Monday morning at 9 a.m. this is what we are talking about. And it's a matter dear to my heart because I understand it, but I also see Treasury management as being part of the route to resolving some of our police budget issues. But these returns, 13 million surplus on budget, is what's allowing us to crack on with things like franchising. We simply wouldn't have been able to do that. And it's building the reserves that allow us to manage some of this risk. So it has been a really good piece of work that's allowing us to deliver on some really exciting bits of work that we otherwise would have been struggling along with. So I think there's a real sound rationale for doing it, and I think we can give you some comfort that actually we know what we're doing. Yeah.
Content. Thank you.
So this is an update from the June meeting, June 19th I think it was, and just to let members know that we on JIAC we have an annual accounts workshop, and that's later this month where we go through the accounts with SYP. So to start off, the meeting was attended by the new Deputy Mayor, which is the first time she's joined us, and will join us at future meetings. So we can have the conversation about the PCC's duty being properly done as far as the committee's concerned. One of our biggest risk issues is the IT services, where you might remember there was a conversation about breaking down the shared service between South Yorkshire and Humber. It's now been decided that that was going to be, in the end, too costly, and has been scaled back now to some shared services and other services staying as joint. A new report's been commissioned. They were given 12 weeks, which is due to report, I think, beginning of next month, but it'll certainly be available for the next JIAC as to where they're going to go with their IT service and how that's going to be constructed. for the future. So it gives us a measure of confidence that that eventually we're getting to the end of this journey that's been going on for about 5 years now. But in my experience in IT terms, if you start off in one place and then arrive somewhere else 5 years ago, it's often not far away from where you started from, because people's opinions differ, and there've been changes of leadership in both forces since then. In terms of workforce planning, SYP of 15.14 FTE over budgeted strength for March. So we're keeping up to date with the operation uplift, which puts more officers on the beat. And in terms of PCSO apprenticeship, we're going to be taking a new cohort of 24 in September. There is, however, a national shortage in detectives, which the police are doing everything that they can to overcome, and there's national work being done on that as well. Gareth mentioned the recovery plan. There's a heck of a lot of work going on by SYP in tandem with Simca colleagues. SYP were in a strong position to start that. I think Gareth acknowledged that in the sense that they were already doing some savings plans. They used something called priority-based budgeting, and we get a report on that at every meeting. There are currently 15 work streams, which seems to me a lot to manage, but there are 15 work streams, so we'll see how that progresses through time. This was a meeting where we took the sustainability annual report, where there's a lot of good stuff going on within the police in terms of sustainability around estates, around vehicles and many other things. So it's useful to see that that's going on. One area of concern is around information rights. So in terms of FOIs, there's been an 18% in rise of FOIs, which obviously puts a real pressure on the department, and 140% increase in subject access requests. And it's subject access requests where we're in the eye of the Information Commissioner's office. So it's, and we have a notice that we've got to improve, and improvements are being made. In terms of Outturn position for budget, there was 6.6 million underspent on the Chief Constable's budget, and 1.9 million on the MCA's budget as well. Again, work continues to address the budget pressures, pensions being one of them, within the force. You've just seen the same Treasury management report that we saw. Internal audit report was done as one would expect it to be done, and we're and are up to date. We are expecting to see financial controls, corporate governance and IT resilience presented at the September JIAC. There's nothing to note in terms of the annual governance statement. There are three new strategic risks, but I'm not at liberty to discuss those in public. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions that anybody wants to ask.
Just in terms of interforce cooperation, I noticed from the annual accounts that North Yorkshire don't seem to participate with South West Yorkshire and Humberside in sharing resources. Is there any history to that you can tell us about, please?
I don't know that there's any history to it. Interestingly, the former deputy for South Yorkshire is now the Chief Constable in North Yorkshire, so you'd think that would mean that there's a likelihood. But you'll know how big North Yorkshire is as a county. And one of the things you asked about agency earlier on, there's a lot of cooperation between forces where a force might be overburdened by a particular activity, and then other forces send, I was going to say manpower, and I'm not sure that that's the right term in this day and age, but officers, that'll do, officer power to supplement the local force. And that, indeed, that's what happened in Rotherham. Forces came together with that. But I don't know of any reason why there's not as much cooperation with North Yorkshire. There is some stuff that's going on around traffic, because Phil will know this, that in an area of Barnsley there's a lot of bad activities going on down the A635 around a particular area where cars are coming from all over the county to race. And I know that work's gone on with various forces to pass intelligence about these vehicles arriving and then not being allowed to go back.
Thank you.
Steve, this is probably completely off the wall. We've heard recently from, I think, the Met Commissioner about greater regionalisation of forces. Has that been considered at all? Any chat around that?
It's not been discussed in our committee. One of the things that's going to happen with Kilvinda arriving is that I think we're going to re-strengthen our links with the police themselves, because I used to have more access to the police from various different committees that we had before the OPCC came across, which I've talked to Gareth about. So I'll say a bit more about what the police are doing in different committees that we meet in. I think that mainly is the Commissioner's opinion of what should happen with policing. And you'll know politically, it's not always the easiest thing in the whole wide world to bring organisations together. I mean, there's been a talk of a Yorkshire force, for example, but the needs in North Yorkshire, with it being coastal particularly, are significantly different from the urban settings that are required. So I've not seen or heard any discussion take place.
Chair, for me, it would be interesting to see how this plays out. One of the other things that we've heard from government, particularly in the context of public service reform, is they see South Yorkshire as a really interesting place to do business, because actually so much of our activity is coterminous. So we have a single MCA for the South Yorkshire area, a single police force, a single fire service, and NHS services are also on a South Yorkshire footing. That is very rare, I understand, nationally, where you get different geographies with different governance arrangements, apart from Baggaley. So it would be interesting to see how all this pans out, because I suspect, as Steve says, it would be very difficult to start to unwind governance arrangements like we have a mayor now responsible for police and crime functions, to try and manage that over a much broader footing with different mayors and the like. I think it might be difficult, so we wait with eager anticipation to see how this plays out. But
I think if it does play out, it might take quite a while.
Yeah.
And the other point, the Commissioner was on Laura Kunsberg the other Sunday morning, wasn't he? And he was talking about the loss that they're having in officer strength. And we're not having that at all in South Yorkshire. We're continuing to boost our officer strength. And I was having a conversation the other day, because one of the things that often happens, because you can't make police officers redundant, so you end up civilianising police officers. Instead, they end up doing civilian jobs, which is not what they generally join for. None of that's happening in South Yorkshire. I took assurance on that personally the other day.
That's good to hear. Anything further? No. Thank you very much for that, Steve. Very informative. So if we go on to risk monitoring report, item 21, Rebecca.
Thank
Wait
you,
a long
Chair.
time for this.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is the quarterly risk management report that provides the risk management dashboard. I just draw members' particular attention to page 459, where the new corporate risks are identified together with those closed over the page. The report also sets out those high and medium high risks at directorate level, so operational risks for the organisation. It also highlights the health and safety and cybersecurity themed risks with a score of 5 or above. And there is an update provided on the internal audit recommendation from the risk management audit and the progress on assurance mapping that's been made. The head of governance isn't here today to speak further about the assurance mapping, but has offered members the opportunity for a demonstration of that work, should members wish to join a briefing session outside of committee. So the recommendation is to consider the dashboard and note the progress of the internal audit recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. One question just to aid my understanding of the report. There are various scores where you've got your inherent score, and then you've got your controls, and then you've got your residual score and your appetite. there's various scores where and then at the far column you've got target score. There are various scores where the appetite, residual score, is shown as within appetite, but the target score is then lower than the residual score, which is puzzling me. So examples on page 472, for example, or but various ones further on, top and bottom of 472, 473, where you've got orange residual scores but yellow target, but they're marked as within appetite. It's puzzling me. I would have thought if they would have been above appetite if they're above our target score. Or am I completely misunderstanding what the report's trying to tell me?
Yeah, I suspect it's to do with terminology around, is there a distinction between appetite and target within that appetite? But I think let's take it away and bring it back with clarity.
Okay, that'd be handy.
I can see one example where it's a brand new corporate risk that's literally just gone on, Dave. So there won't be any updates from previous times. So it's literally just gone on in the last couple of weeks. So that's the one.
I can see there wouldn't be a last up.
Yeah.
But there probably still should be might be some detail on the owner and possibly a target date.
Something like risk 49, insufficient capacity to deliver. Was that one, Dave, you were looking at?
That's
one, the new one. That's a new one.
The one above it, the insufficient police budget, though, that's quite an old one. And that's mine, and I'm fairly confident that there is quite a lot of detail and update on this, not least for the updates I provided earlier about the capitalisation direction and the like. So I think helpful if we can just test with Cllr, because I wonder if there's a system glitch or something going on with some of these.
It shows even at page 471 I have still managed to keep looking at the details of
Well, cold star, yeah.
despite losing the will to live in it.
Congratulations on your patience.
Yeah, we'll send out a revised copy and make sure any gaps are filled.
There's
Chair, I'm interested in insurance mapping. It's something I spent a lot of time doing when I was in the NHS, and if I can be of any assistance, then happy to help.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks.
Yeah, subject to getting answers at some stage in the future.
Yeah, Claire's on leave this week. We'll pick up with her on her return and get you a complete version sent back out, and we'll address those issues.
We're clear what the question is. She'll send us another.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are we content on that? Yeah. Thank you very much. And we move on. Let's do again, Rebecca.
Thank you. So this is the item for the final annual governance statement. members will recall having seen a draft version of this in March. Following that meeting, the report sets out some adjustments that were made following feedback from committee members, and the report was presented to the MCA board on the 24th of June for approval. So it's presented back to the committee today as a final version. Thank you.
We're asked to note the final version.
Could you just have one question, Becca? Was there any questions about the report when it went to board?
I wasn't in the annual board meeting.
Sorry, I don't believe there were, from recollection.
I can certainly check back with my deputy monitoring officer who attended, and I'll feed back separately on that, Paul. Thank you.
Just a quick question, Rebecca, if I can, sorry. On the section, I think it's 5.1, there's a little sort of image from assets around the South Yorkshire police areas on there. For me, I had to really zoom in to see that, and I just wonder whether that's going to be clear enough in publication for people to see that.
Okay.
So maybe just something, happy with the context, maybe it could be bigger or wider, so just so it's clear on the page, that's all. So.
Thank you. I'll certainly take that away and feedback so that we can look at that for publication. Thank you. Okay, so again, members will recall, I think, seeing a previous draft version of this back in March. It went alongside the annual governance statement to the MCA board on the 24th, and this is coming back as a final version for consideration by the committee today.
Sorry, just one question of me. On 510, pages 507 onwards, the plan itself is good in terms of, I think, that it sets out what, why, who, what's deliverable, and which principle it links to. Would we normally expect some dates on that, or are we saying it's a 12-month exercise and we'll get there by March 26, please?
So we would expect dates against that. There will be, there's a piece of work ongoing at the moment to work with officers across the organisation to populate that, and happy to bring that back to committee with those dates once they've been added.
That's great, thank you.
I've got one question on number 6 about equality, diversity and inclusion, and I don't remember if I asked this before, but I should have done that first. Does every policy have an equality impact assessment attached to it before it's agreed?
I can't answer that question right now, but I'll certainly take it away and provide a response to the committee separately. I'll email out. Okay, thank you.
Just out of curiosity, have you seen a report with that one?
Sometimes it takes a lot of work to make sure that those impact assessments are done and attached to the policy and are done properly, because often people see it as a tick box exercise. And Prevent, for example, when I first saw that, it suggested that there was no impact for ethnic minorities, when of course it was about ethnic minorities. So it took a bit of time to get that through people's minds.
Yeah, so this is the proposed work plan for the committee for 25-26. So we bring that today, seeking feedback on the work plan. The one item that I just wanted to raise with the committee is, so Appendix B sets out that we'll provide a quarterly update on the effectiveness of risk management arrangements, but the committee has 5 meetings The head of governance has proposed that, given the proximity of this meeting to the next one in September, and given that the data won't change significantly during that time, that we bring the next risk management report to the November committee. But instead, I understand that conversations have been had about having a deep dive on transport risk at the transport risk working group, so that we, at the next working group, we take that activity instead, and still maintain the 4 quarterly reports to committee.
You confirm that?
Yes, I can, and I think that will fit in with what we discussed about the safety report this morning at item 13, where we're going to skip the next quarterly report and bring it forward in November.
And does that fit with what we might do next meeting?
Yeah.
Consequent to the AOB? Okay.
Yes, we probably will have one other item to add to the 4th of September meeting, but that's subject to AOB. Thank you.
Tricky. Thank you very much. All content with that. Thank you. Gareth, breach of controls report 25.
We don't have anything to report for the last period. We are tracking an issue that we potentially report to you on the next one around procurement without contracts. But I'll conclude the investigation and come back to you at the next meeting on that one.
That's good, thank you. As far as I know, no issues for escalation, or are there? No? No?
Unless we get any from the AOP, I suppose.
Yeah, well, we'll leave that till AOB. Thank you. The mayor is due in 20 minutes. Is he going to be here?
We've got too many other businesses if you want to take those now.
Well, we were going to turn the feed off and then...
These are normals.
Are they? Okay, well, right, okay. On you go then.
Shall I do the first one?
Yeah.
So, rather irritatingly, the government chose to launch the English Devo bill the day after we had to send the papers out for this committee. So, the full name is the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill. Got its first reading in Parliament last Thursday, the 10th of July. There's less than 200 pages, so members will be delighted to know that they can read that through in one night. And Rebecca and I will probably have a lock-in at some point later this or next week to go through the detail. I think the one item which I'd bring to the committee's attention is the section on accountability in Part 2A about local audit reform. So the bill is going to establish a new body called the Local Audit Office, which will oversee local audit, and this is all with the aim, as we'll have seen in previous consultations and discussion around this table, to simplify and streamline the fragmented system. So the remit of the office will be coordination of the local audit system, standard setting, contracting auditors, appointing auditors to local bodies, quality oversight and reporting. So that, in simple terms, some of you may have heard of the PSAA, the Public Sector Auditor Appointments Body, which we've signed up with to procure KPMG and previous auditors in the past. The LAO, the Local Audit Office, would take over from the PSAA and take over that responsibility, for example. What I'd suggest, Chair, is once Rebecca and I, Gareth and others have had a chance to absorb the implications of this section, we can bring a more kind of fuller report or briefing note to the committee, maybe in the next meeting in September, for instance, if that would be helpful.
That would be helpful, yeah. I mean, I've read some of this stuff in previous reports on audit stuff. Be interesting to see what the final final version is.
The second item, Chair, that I just wanted to raise with the board is hopefully you will have seen that we've arranged a special briefing around the proposed investment into the South Yorkshire Airport City project for the 20th of August. That would be a joint session, as we've done previously, with the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We're currently working at pace through our assurance activity. That assurance activity is largely concluding this week and next, at which point we'll enter into quite a prolonged period of engagement with our colleagues in the local authorities to share our findings and work towards a proposal for the board on the 9th of September. So there will be formal time with you on the 20th. We'll hopefully share information in advance to support that session. But just as usual, if anyone does would like a chat on anything, we'll brief as best as possible. So please do shout up.
But you're not going to do that now.
No.
Or not. Yes. Gav, just asking just on that briefing session, I know personally I can't make it because of holiday commitments, things like that. Will there be sort of a follow-up briefing paper after that, or for members that can't make that session, what's the sort of catch-up session?
I think we could potentially look at a mop-up session if members can attend the 20th. Yeah.
Couldn't we just record it and then send the recording out?
I think we'd much rather do that. It's some quite sensitive information at that point. So, but yeah, I'm happy to find time to speak to people who can't attend on the 20th. It is online in the diary. Rebecca and myself have discussed, and I think we will shortly offer the opportunity to come in and do it in person. I think I prefer to do these things in person, but I appreciate some people won't be able to join, so we'll hopefully run a hybrid session. I think the mayor is due at 2 p.m, so if anyone has any interest in holiday stories, we can
or we
share
could,
them.
we could turn the feed off, do the AOB, and then come back. How's that?
Fantastic. I mean, I don't have any huge updates really to give you. I'm here just to kind of answer any questions you might have about what we've been up to. So happy to take any questions about the kind of work of the MC. What have you been up to? Okay, so this morning we launched a partnership with Sport England and Westfield Health, which is a really positive development. So that was a £7 million plan that Westfield Health have lent into Sport England MOU. So that'll drive a load of work in the kind of health and activity space. Also be important for Ed Clancy and Cllr, kind of our active travel team, to become more involved in some of that as well. Clearly we continue to make progress on franchising and the work that's going on there. Really important to kind of like keep up the pace on franchising. You'll know that clearly we've got September 27 sort of deadline on that. We're doing the work on the branding, the livery, the vision document that will accompany some of that work at the moment. So that's been a sort of live topic of conversation. I'm really excited about that. I don't want to kind of give the name away, but I can talk to you about some of the process if you'd like me to. The work on Doncaster Sheffield Airport continues at pace. I know there's been sort of commentary online and elsewhere about some of the kind of timelines attached to some of that. I mean, I'm kind of absolutely crystal clear that we are working at speed and at pace to get to a decision as quickly as we possibly can. And the work that we are doing is vital to making sure that we take the best possible decision, but also that we do our very best to give that airport the brightest possible future if and when we do take that positive decision. So, you know, really important pieces of work that are being led by Gareth and the team to make sure that the airport is given every chance to succeed. So that's been really important. We've had our new Chief Exec, Catherine, join us. We've had our new Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime and Equalities Commissioner, Kilvinder, join us. And they've both hit the ground running, so that's been really positive development in both of those spaces. I think everybody that's sort of met them, worked with them so far, has been really impressed by their commitment and their energy. There have been some really important announcements through things like the SR, so the spending review, you'll know, gave South Yorkshire £1.5 billion for transport. There was £400 million plus for Forge Masters, £30 million for an innovation accelerator, £20 million for Batemore and Low Edges, and a bunch of other things besides. So that was really positive development. And as well as that, we've seen progress on things like the devolution bill, where yesterday I was down in London talking to Jim McMahon about kind of exactly how that will progress and the work that's going on there. That's going to promise to give us loads more kind of power, control, flexibilities, freedoms, but also responsibility. So we're gearing up for some of that through things like the single settlement, which Gareth is leading on again. And so making sure that we're fit, bless you, fit for purpose, fit for the future in that space. I've been with the other mayors doing things like Active Travel England work to make sure that we are grasping the opportunities there. South Yorkshire's kind of leading the way on some of that because we've been focusing on neighbourhoods now for a while, and I think all the other mayors are now catching up with that. So that's great, as well as things like the Great North, working with the other mayors on that plan to make sure that we're working together collectively across the North on things like transport, functions and culture, and a bunch of other things besides. I think that's a good summary of what we've been up to. Yeah. It's a bit of slow few weeks. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. One point I'd like to raise with you is something that's come out when we've been looking at the risks to the delivery of the ambitious plans that you've got. And specifically on the question of bus franchising, we're identifying that there's a very tight market out there for the resources that we need to deliver it. I suppose my question was, and an ask really, is what can the mayors do to help their teams and direct their teams to collaborate with one another rather than compete for the same scarce resource? Because there must be some things that we're doing in this project that are common to all authorities. And for the 4 or 5 who are doing it, there will be some who will want a particular outcome and a particular way of doing that suits their particular local conditions, which is what devolution's all about. But there must be an awful lot we can work together on and minimise the risk then of us paying over the odds for the resources and delivering late.
So that's something I've been alive to now for a couple of years, and I've been talking to the mayors and previous government, now this government, about how we can overcome that through what I think should be a piece of work amongst the mayors on procurement. So clearly you'll know that Greater Manchester, London's got a plan, City's got a plan to buy, I think, 9,000 electric buses. Manchester obviously buying hundreds, if not low thousands. West Yorkshire will be buying a load, we'll be buying a load, Liverpool City region. So you're absolutely right that there's potentially a pinch point there. Now I've been talking to the mayors through, we had an mayoral innovation unit conversation a few months ago, where that was a topic of conversation. It was one of the big topics of conversation. That led into a meeting here, a bus procurement summit led by Simon Lightwood, the bus minister, who came to South Yorkshire to have that piece of work because we've been leading on that conversation to work out how the mayors and industry can work better together to make sure that that procurement pinch doesn't affect us in the way that you've so accurately described. We're now working as a group. There's a bus summit, I believe, in Scarborough. I think we're going up to Scotland at some point to talk to Anna Sarwar about some of the work that he's wanting to do. Clearly you'll know that Alexander Dennis have kind of announced their intention to move some of their team, and the Scottish Labour Party are kind of leading on some work to try and save jobs up in Scotland. So there's a bunch of things going on in that space. I can't tell you that we've got an agreement yet, but I've been leading on some of that. But the mayors are all leaning into this idea that what you've described is right, that if we don't get our act together, we'll end up driving up prices. But the counterpoint to that is if we get our act together, then what we can do is drive manufacturing and innovation in the north in particular. So actually we get the double benefit of more jobs and growth, but also cheaper buses that can kind of that work for all of us. So that's the benefit, and we've got to kind of try and work in that direction.
That's very good, I think, encouraging. I think as well as the hardware, we need to think about the human software as well that's involved in delivering this project. Because I get the impression from the officers who are working closely on it that there's a real shortage of that, and there must be things that we can do, standard boilerplate contracts that we can manufacture between us and then pass on to one another to tweak how we want them. So that's all to the good if that political direction is going to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've talked to Rachel Reeves' team about this as well. I mean, there is genuinely a big conversation going on about procurement in particular. When it comes to the kind of the human side of, the skills side of some of this, I mean, credit to Greater Manchester, who obviously led on a load of this work. They've been really good at kind of helping us to kind of think through some of these challenges. Clearly, we brought in people from Liverpool City region who are now working here on our team, who've been really supportive as well. So, we're all trying to work together. I mean, where we can, we sort of, borrow from colleagues the work that they've done, and I think everybody is collectively working to support each other across that mayor's group. And so, hopefully that is saving us both time and money. It took Greater Manchester 7 years to go from the start of that process to their their start of their franchising. I think we're going to do it in about 5. So, you know, clearly we are kind of taking some of the time out of that timeline by working together and borrowing and copying their homework.
I've got a couple of questions. One around the delayed electrification of the main line and what sort of knock-on effect might that have for transport in the region. And the other is about voting at 1617, which is being confirmed today. For too long, I think politicians have been able to say, well, they don't vote, so we're not bothered. They're going to now. Do you have any ideas about what improvements we might be able to make in services for young people?
So on the Midland Main Line electrification, I mean, I was very clear publicly and privately with the government and also with the press here that I was frustrated by that decision. And, you know, we have a Labour government, I'm a Labour mayor, but I'm not prepared to sort of not say anything when the government make bad decisions for this region. So I'm clear that, you know, I will stand up for this region regardless of who's in power. I think that was the wrong decision to call a pause on the Midland Main Line electrification, because I think it brought huge benefits to South Yorkshire and actually to the East Midlands if we had carried on with that funding and project. I mean, all the evidence from Germany and other places that have electrified their rail network is actually you need a pipeline of projects to maintain a skills base and keep costs down. So kind of pausing that project, I think, causes all sorts of problems, not just to journey times, which will be longer and slower as a result, not just to air quality, which will be worse as a result, but through the skills pipeline, it means things will be more difficult to deliver more broadly. So I am talking to the government about, you know, how long will that pause last for? Can we unpause it as quickly as humanly possible, and have they taken the right decision? Now, you know as well as I do that sometimes when decisions are made, it's quite hard to unmake them, but we are going to carry on having that conversation and doing everything we can to get the government to listen and, you know, determined to do that, because I think it's the right thing to do. I mean, quite honestly, had I been in this chair when they started off that process, I would have said start in South Yorkshire and work down to London rather than the other way around, which would have seemed a smarter decision to me, but we are where we are. On votes at 16, I mean, irrespective really of voting at 16, you know, I think we should be doing as much as we can for young people in this region, because quite honestly, I feel like young people have had the fuzzy end of the lollipop for quite some time over the last few years in particular. If you look at what happened through COVID and some of the real disbenefits that accrued to young people, despite the fact that they were probably amongst the safer groups of people who were less affected by COVID, they still bore the brunt of some of those difficulties, some of the other things that we've seen, you know, impinge on young people, not least things like house prices, not least things like university and the challenge there of funding and places. So look, I am really clear we need to help young people wherever we can to thrive in South Yorkshire. It's one of the reasons I'm so pleased, for instance, to be able to have funded or part funded the young person's pilot for free travel in Barnsley. You know, under 18s now will travel for free on the bus in Barnsley, any bus going in or coming out of Barnsley, but also buses in Barnsley for residents in Barnsley under 18, because it increases their opportunity. It's bringing back the My Card, which people will remember so fondly. I certainly do, and I want to extend that across South Yorkshire until humanly possible. We're obviously doing the Beds for Babies scheme, which is targeted chiefly at under 5s, and we haven't quite got there in terms of voting yet, but who knows. But you know, the under 5s project there is really important to me. Some of the other work we want to do around Every Child a Reader, some of the work we want to do on skills, you know, really important for young people in our region to see opportunity here in South Yorkshire. I think the other things, you know, collectively that we want to try and achieve are around things like housing, building more homes in South Yorkshire, good for young people who want to stay here, building more jobs here, good for young people who want to stay here. You know, so that thing about staying near and going far is genuinely important to me as a young person that got to kind of come home and have a great job and a great life in South Yorkshire. I feel very lucky to have been in that position. Not everybody gets that opportunity in South Yorkshire. Some people need to move out to get on, and I don't think that's okay. You should be able to have that opportunity to have a great life here in South Yorkshire, and that's what I want to try and do. I hope that means that more young people will vote, and hopefully, you know, from my perspective, will vote Labour. But frankly, I think we should be doing this stuff regardless of whether or not they're voting at 16 or 18 or any other age.
Yeah, I certainly agree with all those things. It would be remiss of me to ignore the fact that under the previous administration, much of youth service, for instance, and services around that were dismantled. You know, I would like to see some of that provision come back, if it's only for the management of people's spare time, shall we say. Do you have a view on that?
I agree with you. I mean, I think, like I say, young people have had a really tough time over the last few years. This is not to say that it was some sort of halcyon time between 1997 and 2010, but I certainly think there was more investment that went into young people. There was more investment that went in more broadly, as we all know, and certainly between 2010, 2000 and 2024, a lot of that support went. You know, things like, for instance, Sure Start, which had a knock-on impact on people who are now reaching adulthood, who didn't get access to that support when they were kids. You know, will have a consequence. So I'm personally, you know, committed to doing everything we can to bring back as much support for young people here in this region as possible, because I got a load of opportunities as a young person growing up here, and I think everybody else deserves that chance.
That's all of it. So I guess you mentioned about sort of the housing targets that we've got as well, but I guess the key thing as well, how do we ensure that we've got the right infrastructure around the, particularly around public transport? I always use the famous example, and is in my ward, that we've got the A&P in Waverley, but you can never get to there on there. So how do we ensure that going forward we learn from that and ensure that we have that connectivity?
Really important question, and particularly a really important question for Waverley. No, I want to see better connectivity into Waverley, because it is a brilliant place with huge opportunities now for people, not least young people, who can get access to the training centre. But what we know is only 1% of people across South Yorkshire can access the A&P training centre by public transport within half an hour. So if you live on the other side from Waverley, of Doncaster, Asken for instance, or if you live in somewhere like Cawthorne in Barnsley, your ability to get there on public transport is minimal, so you have to be middle class, you have to have your parents drop you off, or somebody else get a taxi maybe, I don't know, have a car. And that obviously then skews what opportunity looks like in this region. So transport's a huge part of that. The £1.5 billion from government will help us do some of that. So for instance, bus franchising will be clearly supported through some of that £1.5 billion. Tram renewal, so we are able to have a tram network that's fit for the future, new trams on the network. As well as renewal of the overhead lines and cables and everything else besides the tracks. So, you know, that's really important. But what we also need to see is more infrastructure in the places where we want to put more housing. So certainly there's a very live debate at the moment, isn't there, clearly about S13, S35, and one of the challenges there is, can we get the transport networks in there, the infrastructure in there that allows the ambitions there from the council to be supported. Now, I think that's one of the live debates, and we have to have that debate and conversation. So I'm grateful that there is now an opportunity for people to feed into that process, and anybody watching this should have their say through the consultation process. But, you know, we are determined to bring as much investment into the infrastructure as possible, because that's the only way you unlock the growth potential of things like housing sites that are in local plans or anywhere else besides. So, you know, I'm very keen to do that, but it's not an easy thing to do because it's hugely expensive, but it is fundamentally important. We've got to get the balance right. Thank you everyone.